Started on tonight's awesome event. My name is Cherry, and this is Red Emma's. If this is your first time here, this is a worker-owned business, which means that everyone here you see working here at the books kiosk, at the cafe, in the kitchen, or roasting coffee are all worker owners or on their way to becoming one. It's really awesome and empowering. It's a little stressful sometimes, but that's cool. Really excited to introduce this event with Natasha Bowens. This book, The Color of Food, Stories of Race, Resilience, and I actually heard Natasha Bowens speak in April at the Food Book Fair in New York City on a panel called Food and Empire, and that was a panel about food cultures and how it travels around the world and how different things affect it. And it was really great to have Natasha on because she brought the perspective of farmers of color and basically marginalized groups of people who are affected by the forces of oppression or imperialism or colonialism. And that was really great to speak, so this is going to be really awesome. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce PARAG from BASE, Baltimore Activating Solidarity Economies.
Thank you so much, Cherry. Thank you so much to everybody for being here. It's PARAG KHANDHAR. I'm here with Baltimore Activating Solidarity Economies. I am not a native, but I know that it's a big deal for people to come out in the rain. So we are very, very happy to see you all here. Thank you so much. Baltimore Activating Solidarity Economies is a new organization that we have started this year. It's a multiracial value organization dedicated to practicing democracy, advancing race, gender, and economic equity, and building communities most affected by the ravages of the current economic system. So we're looking at alternatives, at partnering to build alternatives, and to really support and lift up the really great people are doing. As well as really thinking about like being problem solvers. How do we move the dial? We can talk about it, but what can we do? And what are people doing? So we're focused on four main areas right now. One is food justice and food equity. The reason why we're here tonight, we're so happy to have this event, and I'll be talking about Natasha in 1 second. The other areas that we're working in are energy justice, so community-owned solar and other options for low-income communities to actually, have self-determination, related to their energy, and also renewable energies. The third thing that we're looking at is community enterprise and really supporting, businesses, enterprise, and the sort of resilience and sort of creativity within communities of color, low throughout the city. People have done a whole range of things, and people are doing a whole range of things. How can we support and kind of build that up in different ways? And the fourth thing that we're really focused on right now is cooperative economics. Really thinking about how to build, building on, sort of the rich history that Dr. Jessica Nembhard wrote about, in African American communities, in immigrant communities, in other communities of color, and in low-income communities, to work together, to share and to build. And so, being here at Red Emma's is a really important thing. That it can work, it will work, and we can change things. So, we're really, happy to be a list for our emails. We promise you we will never share it with anyone. We'll pass it around. Please pass it around. Please, put your email on there. And if you have any interest in any of the things that we said, we'll be sending out updates about other things. Today, to celebrate the project and work that Natasha has put together, Natasha is a local. She's based in Frederick, and she is a storyteller. She's an amateur farmer, a grower, and we are just so pleased to welcome, for this incredible project, which She'll be talking about the project. The book, which you can flip through, you can buy here, is a part of this project. Thank you so much, Natasha, for joining us. Please give her a big round of welcome.
Thank you so much. Wow, Baltimore really knows how to bring it out. This is definitely the largest book reading crowd, and I have to say that I can't thank PARAG and Dorcas enough from BASE for thinking about reaching out to the community of folks who are doing this work here, because this book, we're not celebrate me creating this book. We're here to celebrate the people that are in this book, the work that they're doing around the country. That's why I did this book, was to bring honor and recognize farmers and food activists of color who are doing this work, and we have many of you right here in this room. So I'm just really grateful for the thought of you into the room, to have the food that we were eating tonight be grown by Black farmers of color that are here, local Black farm, real food farm. And of course, thank you to Red Emma's for hosting this space. So normally for the book, I'll go on and I'll definitely talk about the book and kind of what started my journey in starting this book, share some of the stories from the book. But since we have farmers right here in this room, I would love to just kind of open the space afterwards to everyone and anyone who would like to share your own stories. Maybe you walked in here with some burning questions, some burning concerns. You guys are working in the movement here in Baltimore and around the region. And I think that, for me, writing this book, my hope for it is to be a conversation starter, right? To get us in the room together as people of color and allies doing this work, and start to have these discussions or continue these discussions and keep building community. And so I'll present the book a little bit, but then I'd really like to open the floor and bring some farmers up here. So a little background on myself. I'm Natasha. I am a local. I'm in Frederick, Maryland, where I am a beginning farmer trainee this year with the Future Harvest CASA Beginning Farmer Training Program. And we have some trainee the Future Harvest CASA folks in the room, so I want to shout them out. And I also community garden projects right now in Frederick. But I started out in D.C. That's kind of where I was living when the lights went off for me as far as food. Many people don't think about food further than the grocery store shelf, right? The restaurant. And I was one of those people. I never really thought about food. I didn't grow up around farms. I was born in Newark, New Jersey, raised up in South Florida. Aren't exactly farming areas. And before I started this book and started some genealogical research of my own, I didn't really know the farming history in my own family. So completely oblivious, completely new. I was an environmental activist. I was working on the healthcare reform bill as a policy advocate in D.C. and really about social justice issues. And suddenly, I realized the elephant in the room that touched on all these issues that I cared about, on all these issues that I was working on, was food. And the organization I worked for at the time was not focused on food. We were focused on a lot of different issues, and we weren't focused on food. And I tried to push for that for a little bit. And in my own time, I was just immersing myself as much as I could in the movement, learning as much as I could, going to conferences, reading books, volunteering on farms. And eventually I left my job in D.C. and started farming. This was about 6 years ago. And in all time, I was falling with the movement. I was falling in love with being able to grow my own food. The minute I put my hands in the soil, it was one of the most powerful moments of my life. But I was instantly kind of struck by the national mainstream movement of what being connected to our food and to farming looked like. This is, the mainstream of organic food. This is the picture being painted of balance, of healthy food. Very monoculture. Here's a movement that's fighting against monoculture in the ground, but is perpetuating monoculture in these other ways. Everywhere I seemed to look, these were the folks that were joining me going back to the land. America's Best Young Farmers. Oh, I don't know what happened. So all these magazines that were out there, there's a couple more images that aren't, but one of them is a magazine, Flavor magazine, picturing all the young farmers of the Capitol Food Shed. And there I was in D.C., and I wish you could see the picture, but again, same principle. It did not represent the Capitol Food Shed, right? It did not represent D.C., Baltimore, and that whole region. We'll have to do without the images, I guess. Anyway, the point was the picture of the food movement, the picture of farmers, the picture of the history of agriculture in this country, and who's been on this land and been connected to the land and been growing food. None of that was being represented in this movement, as far as through the lens that I was looking at, this mainstream lens. We'll see if it comes up. And I thought, oh, maybe we're not being represented in the media. Maybe the picture isn't being representative of what's out there. But I can get past that as long as I know people are out on the ground doing this work and benefiting from this movement, benefiting from the organic food being grown. But I thought, if we're being left out of the picture, what else are we being left out of? Are the best farmers markets opening up in our communities? The Whole Foods, the organic grocery stores? Is there fair access for farmers of color to USDA and other loans and support programs for farmers? And if that access isn't fair and equal, then could that be why our numbers are so low for farmers of color? According to the latest USDA agricultural census, 96% of America's farms are white-owned. Now, I don't always trust the agricultural census, but and in 1920, for example, black farmers were 1 million strong. Today, 1,000. So, just starting to dig into all of these that food distribution, with access to loans and supports for farmers of color, and with the misrepresentation in the movement, all of these questions were floating around in my head, and I wasn't my crops and my seeds out on the farm. I was busy digging into all of these heavy issues. So I kind of expressing some of my concerns, my questions on my blog, Brown Girl Farming. And my blog got picked up by Gross Magazine, and it was then that I started to hear from farmers of color and food activists all over the country. And it was then that I started to feel some solidarity. I started to feel that I wasn't alone as a brown girl farming out in West Virginia after I left my job in D.C. And I started to feel the same sense of frustration and started to really dig into this incredible movement led by people of color, where agroecology and agriculture and sustainable agriculture was being used as a tool for liberation, to fight oppression, to dismantle racism in the food system. And I just knew that that's where I get my education from. All these books, all these conferences, all these panelists that I was seeing, I didn't want to hear from them. I wanted to go out and hear from the people that were on the ground doing this work. A lot of people that are right here in this room. And that was kind of the inspiration for getting out on the road and writing this book. I was able to raise a little over $10,000 on one of those Indiegogo campaigns, buy myself an old 1990 Oldsmobile station wagon. I had a picture of her. I wish this thing was working, but I'm sorry about that. She was sweet. Her name was Lucille. She did die at the end of the trip, so peace. But I was able to drive all over the country and interview over 75 farmers from Black, Asian, Latina, Native American communities, revolutionizing the food system in their communities. And when I was out on the road and had the blessing to be able to sit at the knee of so many of these farmers and food activists, elders, other young people, the whole gamut, I realized that, my ambition just to try my own way to repaint this picture for me of agriculture that was so frustrating, that first image, that was just a side benefit. I realized that now, you know, to get education from these farmers and to capture these stories and bring kind of the art of story and keep these stories and archive these and gather that wisdom from elder farmers. You know, the average age of the farmer is about 57. For black farmers, it's 63. And as young people coming up with the pitchfork, you know, we're out here scrambling, trying to figure out solutions to a lot of the problems that we see in our food system, not realizing that our elders, they have a lot of these solutions. A lot of these cooperative economics, a lot of these practices, permaculture, sustainable agriculture, that's been around. That's been around. So, you know, it was really, really, really a blessing for me to be able to sit down and just soak up this knowledge. And I really encourage young people out here farming to find an elder, to find a mentor, and soak up as much knowledge as you can while we still have them. So it became about so much more than repainting the picture. It became about digging into the dynamics of power in this country, and that dynamic that's been here throughout, and how that translates into land ownership, how that translates into land loss, how that translates into farmers getting pushed off of their land, their rights to water taken away. So the section of the book is a compilation of stories. Actually, I skipped one part. Let me share a little bit about out on the road. All right, so the book opens up with the prologue, Sowing Seeds for the Road. A little picture of Lucille that I'm sorry y'all can't see. But here we go. The long load road stretches out in front of me, and Lucille's steering feels sturdy under my grip. Dust from the farm road flies off of her windshield, and the wind stirs all the beads and feathers hanging from her rear view. We glow in the light of the setting sun, heading south to the next farm. Lucille spoke to me, and I pat her dashboard. Easy, girl, easy. We've still got a long way to go. After 4 consecutive months driving across this country, I have driven almost 1,000 miles, traveled through 16 states, laid in 49 different places, interviewed 53 farmers, and taken roughly 3,500 photographs. It's been quite a journey, and it's not over yet. I never would have imagined that my desire to dig in the dirt would lead me here, digging instead into the stories of farmers of color across America. All I wanted to do when this all started 3 years ago was grow food, know exactly where my food was coming from, and live more in tune with the earth. But as I began to feel rooted in my life as someone who worked the land, I quickly realized all the cultural and historic baggage that came with that. My father's ancestors worked in the fields as slaves. In fact, they were slaves owned by my mother's ancestors. I'm literally the product of ownership and oppression reuniting, as if to rewrite the story. So when I ended up in the fields myself, I felt deeply conflicted. It was as if feelings about my family history, country's agricultural history, were converging at once. It was as if my agrarian story was already written. The chosen color in agriculture seems to play out on repeat, reducing our agrarian identity to slavery or farming, and some communities as deserts in need of water and food. But I know the story is so much richer than that. I can feel that richness when needing sunshine to sow seeds into the damp soil. I can sense it at the community garden when harvesting side by side with elders born on foreign soil. I can see when volunteering on urban farms led by Latina mothers, changing the health of their communities. I know that if we don't change being told, we will continue to lose that connection to our food, our culture, and our land. We will continue to be known as the underserved communities instead of the strong and resilient communities that we are. We will continue to scoff at the idea of tilling the land instead of embracing the beautiful tradition. If we don't tell our stories, we risk being pushed further into the shadows of the national dialogue on whole foods and sustainable living. A dialogue promoting the diet practices our ancestors had well before the term organic came into vogue. I felt the need to redefine our agrarian identity as people of color, if only in my own tiny way, possibly motivated by my own conflicted feelings. I saw that raising awareness of all the issues and inequities that intersect with race and food was imperative. Storytelling from other farmers of color seemed like the perfect answer. So that's a little bit of what was flowing through my mind to get me on the road and as I drove around from farm to farm. And like I said, I often have to apologize when I do a book reading and then leave in a couple hours because this book, it's not that big. And these stories, they're stories of these farmers and their personal stories, but they are packed with so many threads that are connected to our food, our history, deep threads that are connected to injustice, inequity. And this is just a sliver of it, right? This is just to start the conversation. So I would feel kind of bad because I'm like, all right, conversation, I'll deal with this. Right? So I really just hope that the conversations can continue and we can continue to dig deep. So one of the hardest parts, I think, of writing this book and putting this book together was, all of these stories were so unique and so powerful, and trying to pull them together and find common threads so that I could actually have a book that flowed and find those common themes. And like I was beginning to say, the next section is called Rooted in Rights, and that's really rooted in land ownership and the dynamic of power in this country, losing land. A lot of the stories talk about the history of sharecropping and the history of people being forced off of their lands throughout the global South. And, there's a story in here about some of the farm workers in the Southwest on the border of Texas and Mexico who really help us connect the dots of farm owners in Mexico that are getting pushed off of their land because of policies like NAFTA and international trade policies. And they're coming here to the States, unfortunately having to find work for sometimes the very same farms that have put them out of business back at home, right? So we have to be really aware of connecting those dots. So the Rooted in Rights goes on a lot of stories like this, also talking about losing rights to water, rights over our seeds. And then the next is called Seeds of Resilience. I to focus on a lot of the issues of inequity and injustice, but I didn't want the book to just be about that. We have enough of that, like I said. Our communities are too often defined by statistics talking about our need and our lack of. And I really wanted this book to be about celebrating what farmers are doing. And despite all those barriers and those injustices, the revolutionary work that farmers and food activists and communities of color are still doing. And so that was the reason Resilience made it into the subtitle, and the reason I dedicated an entire section to those stories. And then the next section I want to read from is called Preserving Culture and Community. I think when I started farming, it was about wanting to grow healthy food, right? It was about wanting to feed my community. And after finishing this book and being able to sit with so many of these farmers, my focus has changed. I'm of course still growing food, but that's like on the back burner. It's about growing. And so many of these farmers that I interviewed, especially in this section, were doing incredible work where they were starting seed banks and propagating and bringing back heirloom plants that were sacred to that culture, that community, and giving those seeds out as garden kits to their community. This farmer, Kevin Welch, he was of the Cherokee Seed Bank, the Center for Cherokee Plants, and he would say, we are a seed bank, but we're not really like a seed bank. We don't just sit seeds. We grow these heirloom Cherokee plants. We give them out 700 garden kits a year to all the residents of the Cherokee Nation. And they go around the room where they're doing storytelling and they're supporting folks who are starting their gardens. And they're going out into the community and supporting not only gardeners and being able to grow their food and that right to food sovereignty, but they're preserving culture. They're building community. They're preserving community. So I was really, really inspired by a lot of the stories in that section. And one that I want to share here, I think is relevant, being that it's in an urban area. And this story is about a sister named Jenga Mwendo. Some of y'all may know of her. She's down in New Orleans. And she started an organization called the Backyard Gardeners Network. And Jenga would say she's not a gardener, she's not a farmer, but she is preserving community in the lower Ninth Ward where she's from. And she's preserving the cultural tradition of gardening that has been in the lower Ninth Ward from the beginning of, the community. So I want to share a little bit of her story here. The gardens are our community centers, Jenga explains. It's really about the people first. The space needs to serve the people. It's not about the number of gardens or trying to turn everyone into an urban farmer. What I'm focused on is increasing the capacity of these gardens to serve our people and be effective community building tools. And it's working. We are building community and replenishing old cultural traditions of our neighborhood. There was a time when everyone here had their own backyard gardens, when it was just something that they did, sharing produce, helping one another, harvesting fruit trees that grew around the neighborhood. We decided to do a mini oral history project in the neighborhood, and many of the stories were about how gardening and growing your own food was just a part of the life in the lower Nine. People would forage in the bayou for wild and pepper grass, or take their dogs out to hunt or catch crawfish when the rivers would flood. People in this neighborhood have always been more connected with the land, hunting and fishing in the river, because the lower Ninth Ward was kind of rural and cut off from the city when they dug the Industrial Canal in the 1920s. Despite that connection to the land, folks never really think about themselves as gardeners or part of urban agriculture. Nobody uses those terms. It's just what they do. It's a cultural tradition. And this work is about encouraging and supporting that. That is the way to make culture most sustainable. Culture don't just sustain themselves. They need community and support. Even though it's traditional in our neighborhood, I did have to be very intentional at branding this as something that Black people do. Since urban agriculture is nationally seen as a white thing, and since a lot of people coming into New Orleans after Katrina who are interested in urban ag are white. It's not want them at the garden, but the leadership here has to be Black. I feel very about that. This has to be a space that is safe for people who have felt disenfranchised and overlooked, so that as a community, we know these gardens and projects are not about other folks coming here and deciding what should happen, that this is ours. We started a garden walk program where we walk the neighborhood, visiting all the gardens. And other than being a great exercise for our elders, it's also a way to say, this is still our neighborhood. We are still here. We have to claim our neighborhood. Gentrification is becoming an issue here. This area used to be one of the places during segregation where Black people could come and buy property and build communities. It was like a safe little bubble for Black people to grow and prosper. Folks literally built their own houses here, and before Katrina, we had a 65% ownership rate, which is higher than anywhere else in the city. Of course, now, not the case. There is a lot of vacant land and empty houses to be renovated. The city is trying to get rid of these properties so they don't have to continue maintaining them since the hurricane. So they're doing these. This creates an opportunity for people, but only if you are in a position to take advantage of that opportunity. That's where racial inequity comes in. The predominantly black population that used to live here didn't get the proper support to come back, and now people with resources and support, because of their privilege, are able to move in, to take advantage of our disadvantage. Corporate food are also trying to come in on the opportunity. You see, before Katrina, there wasn't a grocery store in the neighborhood. There hadn't been a grocery store here since maybe the 80s. After Katrina, grocery stores in New Orleans closed and never reopened. And for a while, the place for us to go was about 4 miles away, which is a lot for an urban area where stores should be at least a mile from where you live. 30% of our residents don't have their own transportation, so we're considered a food desert. And in 2011, a Walmart opened up to solve that problem for us. But that's not the kind of solution we want. It really bothers me to hear people talk about solutions to problems in neighborhoods like the lower as just a quick fix. Like, here's a store, any store, as if we'll just accept anything that you give us because we're so poor. It's not the case. It's not that people don't appreciate the effort, but it's important that these efforts are actually supportive, instead of imposing what a few decide onto a whole community. One thing I've been doing is having visioning meetings with the neighborhood to create a food action plan. She actually has now created a food policy council there that outlines exactly what we want for our community. We have certain standards of what we want for ourselves. Residents want a community-owned store, black-owned businesses, a return to the mom-and-pop shops that used to be here, fresh quality produce, meats, bakeries. It's really important to us who owns the store and that the money stays in the community. I am determined to fight for everything that we want. In a neighborhood where people feel ignored and neglected and defeated, especially after Katrina, it's hard to envision when we're focused on what we can't have and what we can't do, what's not possible. We deserve to have these things, just like any other community. We deserve a clean, beautiful, thriving community, to feel good about where we live, to feel powerful. And I'm sorry, again, I can't honor her on the screen, but there she is with her daughter in the lower 9 in one of their gardens. So y'all can see how stuff hits home, right? How stuff really sinks down across our urban areas, across this country, and what's going on with this movement. And why it's so very important that we go and sit at the knee of people like Jenga and people in this room who are maybe pushing similar work forward to really get that important insight. The next section of the book, of course, I couldn't not dedicate to female farmers. So the next section is called Fierce Farming Women, and I had the honor to sit with so many amazing women of color out there farming, tilling the land and feeding their communities. One of my favorite stories was of Sandra Simone, who used to be a jazz singer in Los Angeles. You know her? She's a member of the Southeastern African American Farmers Organic Network, which BLAIN is on the board of, I'm pretty sure. And I guess I'm an ambassador. They're an amazing network of black farmers throughout the South and also the Caribbean. They're going all over the world. They go to Slow Foods International Terra Madre event in Italy and represent African American farmers here, because there are farmers represented all over the world. That Slow Food USA wasn't really representing the diversity of farmers that we have in this very country, so Saffron has really stepped up and done a great job doing that. And they're doing amazing work. But Sandra Simone is a farmer that's a member of that network. She grows organically goats, and she does this by herself. She is one of the strongest women that I've ever met, because she dreamed up this vision to reclaim her family land that was, a lot of it was lost through heirs property laws. Just family getting pushed off the land, families selling off plots of land. And she reclaimed some of that land with her husband, who really pushed her to see land as something to preserve, something to save. And as soon as they finally jumped through a lot of hoops, a lot of barriers, they were part of the Pigford USDA lawsuit, discrimination lawsuit. But they finally got their land, they got their home built, and her husband passed. He transcended on. And she had that moment where she could choose to leave and not do that by herself without her partner, or stay and keep on their vision. And she decided to stay. And she's out there, and a lot of what we talked about is how lonely it is. A lot of rural farmers know how lonely it can be, but especially alone, to be a woman of color in the South, in a rural area, really fighting against a lot of gender discrimination in the agricultural world down there. And she was fierce. She actually was named Farmer of the Year by the Alabama NRDCS the year that after I interviewed her. She called me up, and that was just so inspiring for me. So of course, a whole section dedicated to women. And then the very last section, and we're going to open the floor soon after this last reading, is dedicated to other young farmers. Generation Rising. And we have some wonderful, inspiring young farmers here in the room that I want to transfer the floor to in just a minute. But I do want to shout out some young farmers that were really inspirational to me down in North Carolina at Tierra Negra Farms. Christina Rivera Chapman and Taz Walker. And I just think that although this section really focuses on the really innovative, revolutionary work that young people are doing and the importance of young people of color reclaiming lands and pushing agroecology forward, but in every story of these young people that I sat with, elders came up. A lot of times that's all they would talk about. And I thought, no, I've already interviewed the elders, honor the elders, let's celebrate the elders, but I'm trying to dig into you and your story. And suddenly I had to just sit back and really understand what they were saying. And it's what I said before, and it's because I got my education from these young farmers, is we cannot move forward in this movement without the mentorship of our elders. And I just think it's really beautifully explained here by Taz. So they're running their farm down in Durham, North Carolina, and that whole area is home to the Occaneechi band of the Saponi Nation, Native American there that they've befriended, local elders that they've been friends with for a few years, and they're speaking about them here. Our friend Yvette, who is a member of the Occaneechi band, lives here and can trace her family back to the 1600s. And she's going to help us frame some of the conversation as far as remembering what communal models of land ownership have existed before. I think because of what Christina was talking about with the current models of land ownership, we need to reach out to models that existed pre-colonization. I think that's where solutions are. In some ways, it's intimidating because there's really no systemic support for that now. But we know that there are systems that existed before this system. And Vivette is teaching us to tap into that ancestor database and realize that we have support in the room. We don't have to disregard our ancestors when having these conversations about communal land and stewardship. Another elder, Elwood, who is Black and Occaneechi, has passed on many different skills to me. And when I ask him about his identity with the land, he always talks about the elders. It's like he forgot the question and just mentions the elders. But it's just a different type of relationship to land. There's no disconnection between thinking about land and elders. Our ancestors are synonymous with the soil. So I think we have to start connecting with what they would have wanted and what they would have done in our relationship as humans to the earth. It's a tough concept, And this culture doesn't value that at all. For my generation, it's like, when's the next iPhone coming out? But the value goes beyond this individual generation. It's about honoring people even if they're not here. Now Christina's jumping in. And it's also about honoring we still have here with us, she adds. Our elders and our family members who have gifts and talents that could be supported, not staying on or staying on land, but for the whole picture of survival. If we all utilize their gifts and talents as a family, it might make it easier to survive and stay and do what you need to do to be in the world. I think it's important to find ways to have conversations as family about that kind of collective, long-term survival that could then spread to build strong communities. If we used our collective skills and talents as forms of aid within communities, think about how vibrant and dynamic the community could be. Like the one we work in now, where we are working towards structures to share resources like our tool share program, or where we are creating childcare for others to be able to do their thing, or trading food for gardening. Systems like that feel more compelling to me. I'm not interested in everyone becoming farmers. It's more to make a cooperative economy that's dynamic enough to support what everyone needs to do. That may not eliminate the need for money, but it would try and offset it as much as possible. Again, for me, it feels like money is the trap. And those communal trade systems are already there. We don't invent anything. These have been laid out by our ancestors, and they might still exist in some communities. But it wasn't that long ago when they existed widely. I remember talking with an elder farmer who told me about his experiences of always farming in different places. And I was confused because I knew he had his own farm, but then I understand that this is what farming looked like then. It was just communal. It was like building community was just what you did because there was no way that you alone could do what needed to be done on the farm. So there was only a sharing of resources and time. This farmer told me about how when they would process corn, they would start on one farm, and then for a whole day they would move farm to farm to farm. And whoever's house they landed at by the end of the day would feed everyone. That was all encapsulated as farming. It's just what it meant to be a farmer. So these are just slivers, bits of some of the amazing insight and wisdom that these farmers and food activists interviewed for the book hold. And I know that there are even more amazing farmers and food activists in this room that hold a lot of wisdom and that travel around the world sharing that wisdom and pushing movements forward. So I'd like to introduce them up here to join me. ALEYA FRASER of Black Dirt Farm, BLAIN SNIPSTAL Black Dirt Farm, DENZEL Washington of 5 Seeds Farm and Apiary. Come on up. And then, like I said, you know, I'm going to have them share a little bit about their experiences as much as they want to share. And then I'd love to just open the dialogue, dig in. Elder first.
Thought I was just gonna be able to wave. That would be enough. So I'm Denzel Mitchell.
Oh my God!
It happens all the time. It's all good. Of 5. I'm from a little town called Guthrie, Oklahoma, and moved here to Baltimore, Maryland in October of 2006. And with 3 children at the time, decided that I wanted to be a farmer. And had no idea what that meant. It looked great when I was a kid, watching my great aunties do it, grow all their own food for us, and food for their community, and very small community outside of Henrietta, Oklahoma. And I just started growing food. And now 2015, I've had some great experiences. I've met some amazing people, and there's lots of folks growing food in Baltimore, and that makes me very happy. So I'm glad that Natasha is here telling the story, because I've been meaning to tell a story to one person here, one person there, one person there. But Natasha had no sense to put it in a book, and that's amazing. So I met Natasha in 2010, 2011 in California, same time I met BLAIN, and this is I couldn't have asked for a better experience. To be able to learn how to grow your own food, grow food for people who you know, and to really connect the dots around what we're eating. It's just been a phenomenal experience. So we should keep doing it and keep pushing it forward. And I'm gonna hand it off to young people.
So I actually started farming with DENZEL out on 5C's farm, where it was one of my first contacts with the soil in such an intimate way. It was a black farm, clearly, and mainly people of color that I was dealing with going there. And all of the conversations were none of our conversations were ever just about growing food. So from the minute I started farming, we were talking about social movements, agroecology. We were talking about how to empower our communities and why this. It was never a mindless activity for me. It was very mindful. So I started growing on his city site, which was right in East Baltimore, not too far from here. And it was a nice introduction to farming. And I always say that I had pretty low barriers compared to most young farmers, because I had the BLAIN, I had the Farm Alliance, which is a Baltimore organization. I had Real Food Farm, which was right around the corner. And I wish that every young farmer, especially of color in an urban setting, could have had such a cushy way to start farming, but we don't. So right now, trying to figure out how to create training systems and training systems in rural areas, and also systems in urban areas where young black farmers can have better support. So, for example, we're around trying to make the linkages between black churches and black farmers so that we can all support each other, and being very intentional about the communities we are trying to reach. A lot of people get a little upset when we say I'm just talking about feeding black people, but at the end of the day, I farm because but 745 people this year have been killed by the police. 99% of the wealth in the world, 1% of the population. As Natasha said, our number of farmers went from 1 million to 20,000 right now. So we're in a crisis, and land, because of my connection to land in my DNA, it's hard to talk about owning it, but system where 96% of the land in the United States is owned by white people, and only 4% is owned by people of color, and you find out where black in there is, and it's probably less than 1%, right? Then you start seeing where power is. And I also like to see, and I also farm because I see feeding people as a form of empowerment for communities, because communities that are being fed from outside sources are never going to be powerful within themselves, because they're not you know, yeah, you cannot be powerful if you're not feeding yourself, which is a quote from a friend and mentor, Monica White, that I heard at a Black Urban Growers Conference a couple years back. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. With me and Blaine and I farm out on the Eastern Shore, and Sexual Lens and Harriet Tubman. So we're also dealing with, I'm also on her lands and always remembering how her freedom away from the land in a way is tied to my freedom coming back to the land. Because, I'm just trying to, and I, as my community, are trying to reconnect those roots back to the land. Because once we were disconnected in a lot of different ways, not only from Africa, but from the South, we lost a lot, and we lost a lot of knowledge that we need to reclaim. So, yeah.
Shout out to Denzel Washington in the building. Denzel. Right. I guess I'm the third strike on the platter here. Many thanks to Natasha. I actually met Natasha at the same time I met Denzel, as Denzel said. Yeah. And then we connected again. Milwaukee, she and her partner at the time, the farm partner group, they were doing a workshop on herb justice. I don't know herbs were unjust. There was injustice against herbs, but I found out there was herb justice. And it's not the kind of herb that's legal in DC. But anyways, I'm a little bit taller than the folks that came before me. I got it. Right. Check. Okay. So anyway, she was farming in New York State, and so I went up there at the time because they were looking for a farm manager. And I've always been sort of traveling and farming until Denzel fished me out of Southern Maryland. And but anyways, I went up there, and there was another farmer I met. His name was Jalal Sawar. He's a 6'6" young black farmer, and we were walking through the woods, and we were tapping maple trees. And it was such a profound moment because he said, "Hey, bro, put your head under the nipple." And I said, "What?" I said, "What are you saying?" He said, "Put your head under the nipple." So I go like this. And like when you tap maple trees, it's this very clear liquid that comes out, right? And it's just like pure medicine. And it's the sweetest tasting water you ever taste. They have to boil it down and it gets all brown. This complex chemical process. But anyways, it was just a profound moment because I'm drinking this nectar from a tree, and on the other hand, there's a 6'6" black man telling me to put my head under a nipple. And I was like, yo, this is transformative. But, but anyway, just to say, you know, a lot of us in this region, actually, Denzel, we talk about him all the time because a lot of respect needs to be given to Denzel and Tiambe Mitchell of 5 Seeds Farm because, you know, agriculture for black folks, right, is an extension of our resistance against colonialism for the past 500 plus years. And what has happened in the process is that sometimes we lose the sight that actually our history is rooted in. When I first, I was only chocolate in the water, as they say. And I actually had no idea black in the U.S. I had at all. I just knew one other black farmer's market, so I'd always buy their collard greens. I didn't know what to do with greens. My grandma ain't teach me yet, but I would always buy their collard greens. They get rotten in the refrigerator. I never told them though. I never told them. But anyways, make sure y'all know how to cook collard greens because they're good for you. But anyway, so I said to have an experience with people of color can work in a rural area where the rural area pushed us out because of the land, but because of the social conditions means that we conditions in rural show us love and safety. And 5 Seeds Farm, I think, created that in this region and sort of sparked what Denzel and I were talking about in sort of this agrarian renaissance that has to take place amongst us. And so for that effect, you know, Denzel
I love you, brother, and I just wanted to say that because that's been a long overdue. A lot of us see 5 seasons in that light. And so the last thing I just wanted to say too was that, I think today, in a very urbanized society, agriculture plays a very unique role. And again, sort of, we're in an urban setting, and on our farm, Black Dirt Farm Collective, it's not just ALEYA and I, it's Randy Johnson and Sasha Johnson and I to make it tonight. We recognize this fact, and so we actually host trainings for folks to come out to the farm and get very intensive training in agroecology, so like the nuts and bolts of how to actually produce food in harmony with nature, but also political training, because guys, that it's not enough to teach someone how to grow food in the business of agriculture alone. That's not going to transform individuals, right? You can still have racists, but they can be great farmers. I don't want to farm with that person, and nor do I want to be in community with them. So we recognize political training and consciousness raising have to be tied together. And so, we take a lot of elements from VFTP, but also elements from the book and from elders, which there was one here tonight, but she had to leave earlier. So, I just wanted to sort of give that and shout out to Sasha Jones, Walker B. Moore Marr, you know what I'm saying, the other farmers in the room who are doing the thing here in Baltimore, because we're all connected. And although we might not be in many other places beyond this book, we see each other. And that is actually the most important thing, because sometimes when you're not, you don't see yourself. But when someone sees you, you're seen, and that's important. So thank you, Natasha, for allowing us to be seen and giving us this moment. Thank you.
So I just want to close with flipping that right back on you, because I see myself and find my place in agriculture in this movement by finding solidarity and folks like yourself and all the farmers of color that are out there holding it down. So thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Keep on. And thank you, Red Emma. I don't know if we have time for questions or what the, yes, questions. Open the floor. Sorry, so small now. And please, I'm definitely not the only expert, the expert in the room. So any questions for anyone, jump in. This is a dialogue.
One of my first questions would be what was like the hardest thing you guys done, like far as like urban settings? How was it like connecting with the community? Like what barriers did you guys face in terms of farming in urban settings, in terms of like connecting with the community?
The hardest thing, I don't know. The hardest thing was doing it, just deciding one day that this is what I'm going to do. I mean, everybody's story is different. My story is that I wanted to create the same reality that I experienced as a kid for my own children. And I wanted other children to learn that you can grow your own food, that people used to do it, actual people do it, that it doesn't just show up at the grocery store, and that I needed to be seen doing it. And that's hard, that's a daunting task, because, if anybody knows where Brims Lane in Kenya is, it's on a very busy street, or it gets a lot of traffic. And there were a lot of people that were like, what is he doing? This is ridiculous, This has been a pocket park, or been a green space, or been an empty lot, or a vacant lot for years. And this dude is out here trying to grow food. And, there are a lot of people that are like, that's just absolutely ridiculous. That was the hardest part. But when you're out there every day, you start to make connections, you start to talk to people, it becomes easier. There were people that walk They say, I remember when my grandmother did that, or I have uncle who came up from North Carolina who used to do that. So big up to you. Can I get a straw? Can I get some tomatoes? With them tomatoes. And being okay, I mean, that's an easy thing, but at the same time it can be difficult because you're reaching out to people in a way that you never have before. It's much more than a handshake. It's looking out the window and seeing 15 kids walking through the garden at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then the roads, and not going out there and blasting them. I mean, it's going out and talking to them and creating. That's what this is all about. So it's been a process, but you talk to people, you tell people what you're doing, and some inspired, and you get to a place where people are coming to you and they're starting to ask questions, and then you get to a place where people move from that first meeting with you and they got their own farm, and that's just an amazing. It's just been an amazing. So it takes time, it takes hard work, it takes blood, it takes sweat, it takes tears, but that's what this is about. I mean, we're doing something that all of us do multiple times every single day. And all of us should know how to grow some food. Period.
Oh. All right, hey, my question is, is someone with me?
I mean, you literally, he said, if you have no experience, how does one get started? So yeah, if you have no experience, you have to just jump out there and you have to start volunteering first. When I first went to 5 Seeds, I was super idealistic. I was like, I want to start an urban farm and feed everybody, and it's going to be the best thing in the world. And then once I stepped foot on the farm, I was like, oh, wait, this is a lot of work. And so that's the first step. You have to get grounded, go back to reality, and really start from scratch in your own mind. Whatever of what you want to do with farming is, not until in weeks on a farm, really, on multiple farms, will you really understand what it takes. And then number 2 would be, even if you're not farming, you have to start reevaluating your with land and with food. So, people always say it's hard to go to the farmer's market, once a week, or it's hard to find local farms, or something's more expensive, but really it all comes down to values. And when you value your health and when you value other farmers, you're going to be willing to work with them, volunteer with them, pay prices that you might be more expensive in the grocery store, but at the end of the day, it's better than medical bills and a lot of other stuff. So.
So my question is, do you think that farming can create new jobs, more jobs for people, for them to get paid? Also, picking up trash around the city, because I think people should get paid for that trash.
I don't know if I can speak to the trash jobs, but I think that to have farmers, yes, I do think that we can create jobs for people who want to farm, but there's got to be a lot of focus on, and this is, I was going to say, with that question of the challenge of urban farming, I think that I've seen a lot of farms trying to both be a profitable business and be a space for building community. And I definitely think it can be both. There's many examples of being both, but I think that's the struggle and the challenge. Come on up.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Yeah, I think it's important to highlight your question. I like your shirt. It's really to highlight that point because the economics of agriculture is real. There's no getting around it. And I think there's a difference in the rural and the urban farming scene, right? I think here in Baltimore is that sort of outside of the 5 Seeds Farm experience and maybe a few others, that majority of urban are actually nonprofits. So that gives us a different sort of an economic way to look at how farming is done inside of a city. Whereas most rural farms are for-profit ventures, and so there's some very serious economic realities. I mean, there are statistics out there to give you straight. One that I came across the other day, 86% of farms in the U.S., small farms, in the U.S. state defines anything under 500 acres small farms. So 86% of those farms actually end the year $1,500 in debt on average. 80+% of farmers work off-farm jobs. So, you know, there's real economic severity to actually trying to do it full time, which is why I went to BFTP classes, although I wasn't apprentice in the program. I've been in the beginning farmer training program by Future Harvest College. I was in an apprenticeship program in Kansas. The first thing, the lady came in the room, didn't even say hello. She wrote up on the board, farming is a business, and said anyone who wants to play in the dirt, you need to get out. I almost got out, but I'm glad that I didn't, because the reality is we can't lose sight of that. It's not to sort of say it's the only piece in the equation, but if we're actually thinking about alternative economies, an economy beyond the basis of capitalism, part of that transition needs to answer the question, how do people get paid? Because we have bills, we have debt, and our economy is a wage-based economy. So we need a wage to help the transition process concretely. And just to give a concrete example, you know, I was farm managing with DENZEL for 2 years at 5 Seeds Farm. Our first year off the bat together, we put our numbers out there just so people know what can happen. So, you know, before DENZEL and I linked up, the growth, not net and gross are two different things. I'm not trying to get into accounting, but the growth before we came together was around 40K. When we came together, and then we 2 other part-time, we hit 90,000, right? So what that taught me in that moment is farming is a business, and it can make money, but imagine what dollars can mean in terms of jobs, at least part-time in a rural area, which those of some rural areas know the economy is shrinking in the rural area. And most of them are actually just there for housing lots for people to work in cities. And so, you know, I say all that to say, we need to understand the business of agriculture and the art of farming, right? Farming is an art, and agriculture is a business. And so it's very important. So to answer your question, absolutely, it can create jobs. But we need to know how those jobs can be created and how many jobs the farm can support.
I'd like just really quickly, I wanted to address the gentleman's comment because I think it goes back to some of what I was pulling out of the excerpts here when talking about how the community has to come together. We all have a role to play, and Denzel mentioned it. What do we do 3 times a day? We all this food, and so we have to come together and support farmers and find our role in the community of how we can bring that produce and keep it in the community. And I'd like to invite the Reverend up here to speak to what he's doing here in Baltimore to support farmers and to bring that produce into the community. Yes, I'm calling people out. Come on. I haven't even met you.
Peace, everybody. My name is Heber Brown, and I'm thankful to be connected to BLAIN, ALEYA, and Black Dirt Farm, and Dariel, and a whole host of other magnificent people. And we've launched recently something called the Black Church Food Security Network. And it came out of a conversation ALEYA, Dariel, and I had in December of 2014. But it really manifested in the midst of the Baltimore uprising earlier this year. But basically, 2 institutions that enjoy enormous autonomy, the Black Church and Black agriculture, and bringing them back together. And I say bringing them back together because there was a time when, Black Church, was very central and very connected to agriculture and farming. In fact, even some of our traditions to this day in the church around homecoming. A lot of churches have homecoming, right? Homecoming used to be the time when people would come back home to the church that was on the land that helped to support the community. So anyway, the Black Church Food Security Network is a fledgling operation in a dream, but it's the wheels are starting to roll, and we're thankful. We're learning a lot along the way in terms of creating alternative food system by creating pipelines for fresh food that go directly into the sanctuary. But as BLAIN just said moments ago, and a brother, you just mentioned one of the markets in East Baltimore that shut down. We talked about, BLAIN, what you saying? He said, farming is an art and agriculture is a business, right? And so we are in the midst of the Black Church Food Security Network. We are living in spaces together. I'm hopeful and that we can make it work in terms of creating income and jobs, and jobs, all of that. Why? Because the Black Church is one of the oldest institutions that Black people have ran from almost since we got here, right? And so in terms of economics, I don't know what anybody's, different people's spiritual identities are, whatever, but Black people in churches practice cooperative economics. So you may not, have Kwanzaa principles and red, black, and green flags everywhere across the city, but every single Sunday offering time happens, and Black folks dollars and put it in a basket to take care of the needs of that community. Somebody gets sick, we put money together. Somebody get put in their house, so we practice these things. My prayer and what I'm hoping to see as a pastor is that in this where community already happens, where people share life and share the material things of food, etc., that we create a pipe to help support farmers and help support ourselves by getting the food that we need. And so in the one place that we do employ people, Black churches employ folks. I'm an employee of a Black church. And Black churches also employ, and they employ sextons and people who run the facilities. My dream one day was employing farmers and creating a line item in the budget every year to support farmers, because we know when you support farmers, you support yourself. So send good vibes and good energy to that. Our prayer thing will work, but following the lead of ALEYA, BLAIN, Dariel, and a whole host of other folks, we're hopeful that it can happen. I also got to say to the godfather here, Denzel Washington, that I was one of those people who drove by and said, that brother. Nah, really did. I pulled over and said, man, what are you doing? You're not from around here. And heard about this guy for a long time, then see him out here. So I tip my hat as well to this brother, to the godfather of a lot of why the farming has been revived in this city. So give him a little bit more love to this brother. And to thank you, Natasha, as well. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
No? Okay. It was kind of bouncing off of what they said. I wanted to ask all of the farmers in the room. I wanted to ask, or perhaps have them speak a little bit more about their relationships of trying to, with other businesses in the community, and how they've tried to find that support in order to fund their farms. I wanted them to speak more on like the positives of that and the negatives. If they could talk about their ideal business relationship and the respect that they would like to have and get from the community and other business owners. Because I'm sure there are other business owners in the room other than myself who would like to hear how to have that ideal, perfect, respectful relationship of what you do, because what you do is an art. So, who wants to take the play? Oh, Sasha. Sasha. Hi, Sasha. I saw you looking away. Hey, girl. Hey, girl. Oh, I'm to answer the question. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's me. I'm Sasha. Nice to meet you. Oh, okay. I'll stand. Hi. I would say like the perfect business farm relationship. I have had trouble like establishing relationships with business, and I'm a nonprofit farmer, so you know I don't always do, and I'm kind of happy not to do that. But like in partnerships with businesses in my neighborhood, it's always, oh, you guys should come in. Oh, it costs this much for this. And again, I'm a nonprofit farmer, so like I'm not actually eating from the food, you know, that I'm selling, you know. So we are able to offer at a lower rate, but there are just kind of cost barriers. And then with the apples and oranges situation that we're all kind of talking around, I will say these folks over here, the Blues, I'm going to pull them out on the spot. We have some elder farmers here, the Blues, so come and meet them. They farm in East Baltimore. But the issues have been, like in mom and pop shops, I find that it costs too much. And for more established businesses, we don't have the insurance. We don't have the safety protocols. And so, you know, it would help if we would aggregate and buy the insurance that we need and buy the processing facilities that we need to be able to source food locally, truly locally, but it's cost prohibitive. And so the perfect relationship would be with small businesses like yours, Crystal, or any other, and Crystal's being modest. Everybody should patronize Crystal. She is owner of Karma Pops and the Bicycle. But so she sources locally. But anyway, it would be nice if we could have some type of just easy way to like, okay, this is what I have available. This is what you need. This is how much it costs. Please don't haggle me so much. I just spent hours growing this. It's hot. It's cold. You know, like this is a thing. But then for larger businesses, some type of aggregate or some type of cooperative amongst ourselves. We're all here and we're talking about it. But how can we combine, you know, our buying power and our growing power? Oh, big ups to Will Melvin, I guess. Sorry. Sorry, guys, I'm weird. But anyway, how can we combine all of these things to actually to be able to go within the system? Because the unfortunate thing is, or the thing is, it doesn't matter if it's fortunate or not, is that people are used to buying food a certain way. And so how can we mirror the system that they already have? And so with businesses, you know, we are not a Cisco, we are not, you know, we're not an aggregate, but that's what businesses look for. So how can we mirror that better within the urban food movement? And then how do we connect to small businesses like yours? And I mean, a registry, something, just some type of recognition. A lot of people just don't know that I personally exist, and I'm sure that's the case of a lot of different farms. So on the business end, perhaps a buying group with amongst yourselves, like this, we are a business group and we want to buy this. This is the price that we want to buy it at. or these are the farms that can supply it, and trying to create those joint buying networks. We have a growing network and you have a buying network, and kind of merge those things together so that we can get the food into the hands of the people who want it in a price that is sustainable for both of us.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you for this time. Thank you, everyone who shared. Thank you for letting me call you out. I am so inspired by the work that you're doing, and I hope we can stay connected now that I am in Maryland. Thank you again to Red M. Thank you, John, also a member of BASE. Thank you, PARAG. And thank you to Black Dirt Farm and Real Food Farms for feeding us earlier. Thank you, Cherry.
So Natasha's book is available right here at the books kiosk. Please check it out. I'm so technical difficulties, but all the beautiful pictures are in the book. And sign up for more updates from BASE. And make sure to bust your dishes over there. Thanks for coming, y'all. Yeah.